China wasn't actively involved in World War I. They didn't suffer any major casualties. In August 14, 1917, China declared war to a weak Germany because they were looking to take some of the German colonies in Asia. Since China didn't really influence or really help in the outcome of the war, they weren't included in the Treaty of Versailles, which meant that they weren't going to receive any German colony. Although we must point out that important British factories were based in China. These factories produced weapons for the Allies. When the First World War finished, China and Japan were involved in a war. This war is known as the Second Sino-Japanese War. This war lasted from July 7, 1937 to September 9, 1945. It was later fused with the Second World War after the Pearl Harbor incident. After the Mukden incident, Japan used this as an excuse to occupy Manchuria. Manchuria is a region in China. Manchuria became Manchukuo. After various incidents and conflicts, tensions escalated. The Marco Polo Bridge incident is considered to have begun the Second Sino-Japanese War. Japan invaded China, and nationalists and communists joined their forces to defeat the Japanese army. In 1941, after the Pearl Harbor attack, American forces helped divide the Japanese army in two fronts. By 1945, China had suffered over 15 million casualties. But after USA dropped 2 atomic bombs in Japan, World War II and the Sino-Japanese War ended. China wasn't really involved in any other World War II front other than the one in China.
Human rights in China. P.C. Chang of the Republic of China was part of the drafting committee of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, and the ROC, not the PRC, voted in favor of the declaration. Actually, international organizations have stated that authorities in mainland China regularly sanction or organize violations of human rights. Evidence is regularly presented of the PRC violating the freedoms of speech, movement, and religion of its citizens and others within its jurisdiction. Authorities in the PRC claim to define human rights differently. According to their constitution, their so-called 4 cardinal principles supersede individual rights. Examples of policies that are believed to be mishandled by the government include the death penalty, the one-child policy, freedom of press, and the lack of workers' rights. Some rights are changing, although activists working to realize these changes are sometimes known to be harassed and arrested.
The Chinese Civil War continued in 1945 after the Second Sino-Japanese War ended. The Communist Army was concentrated on the northern and northwestern part of China. They built networks that consisted in local governments and village party leaders that appealed to patriotism. The United States assisted the nationalists with millions of dollars and many troops. The USSR supported Mao's army. China's casualties were pretty high, around 8.007 million Chinese citizens died. In 1949, after capturing Beijing, the Communist Republic of China, led by Mao Zedong, finally defeated the nationalist Chiang Kai-shek. In Kuomintang, members fled to Taiwan, and the People's Republic of China is established. After the successful victory of Communist Party in 1949, China became communist and supported the USSR bloc. Although they weren't part of it, during the Cuban Missile Crisis, the USSR leader Nikita Khrushchev fails to keep the Soviet missiles in Cuba. China considers this as a sign of weakness. They accuse the USSR for not being aggressive enough. They break all ties with the USSR, but little they knew that this would be a costly mistake. Without the Soviet Union's opinion, China realized they couldn't feed its people, causing hunger, and after a huge revolution, taking advantage of the situation in 1972, President Nixon offered solution to China. By then, China was one of the poorest countries on earth, but still had a lot of power. Nixon provided economic facilities to the Chinese government. In return, China had to help the American proxy wars, for example, Afghanistan.